Hey everybody, HMV here, playing more Rimworld, and we start the day here with breakfast and cargo pods. 13 Thrumblefer. Well, okay. Albert gets up too and has breakfast himself, in bed and not at the table I made them. Then he goes to relax. At the table. I figure I must have put their bedrooms too far from the kitchen and was planning on giving them better bedrooms anyway, so I moved that up on the list. First, though, we need to mine up some steel. And build those power generators. Hermione gets her cooking on, and I realize we're basically out of food. So I queue up some more foraging. Hermione eventually picks the berries, and then takes the longest route possible to do some mining. Oh well, I guess we do need those components. And then she eats their very last meal. At least she used the table this time. And then we get a transport pod crash. Lance, Private Eye. He's such a tough cookie, he decides to just walk it off. Right off the map. He's got 7 hours to live and 2 perfectly good lungs. But because he's up and moving, I can't capture him, and because he's an enemy, I can't arrest him, so I do the next best thing. I attack him. Albert conks him on the head, and we drag him into a cell. I give Hermione a temporary bed in the dining room, and don't realize that she's fallen into the I was drafted, so now I must eat trap, and we have no food, so she goes right for the raw meat pile. Oops. Albert gets Lance all situated and even patches him up a bit. Using all of our medicine, I tell them to forge some more. And then Albert gets to work on that lung. Success. Okay, Lance, you're free to go. When you're feeling better, that is. I realize we never hauled that dead barbarian out to our dead body pile, so I make Albert do it. We're having enough mood troubles right now. I want to hunt, but Hermione's not nearly a good enough shot to risk animal revenge, so I queue up a few turkeys to hunt. And while I'm perusing the workboard to figure out how to make that happen quicker, Hermione goes on a tantrum, because she's so hungry. Smashing up her room is one of the less bad things she could do, especially because Albert ended up taking the sleeping spot in the kitchen. She finally gives up doing that and decides to release our prisoner. Lance wanders off to the south, presumably to better pastures elsewhere. And we finally get our cooler. It's going to be so useful if we ever get any food. Hermione, for her part, gets right on that. She's such a bad shot, though, that she almost reaches level 6, shooting at 1 turkey, before finally getting it. She butchers it and tries to fake me out by appearing to cook it, but she runs to the table to eat more raw meat. I don't think so. You make proper meals, young lady. I let her eat the first one, then make sure she cooks up the rest. But then Albert comes in and tries to eat raw meat of his own. So I make him cook at the stove. Okay, I understand being so hungry that you'll eat raw meat, but eating it right next to the stove, I mean, come on. In addition to everything else, Albert's sleeping on the floor in the cold. I fix one of those things with a torch. Hopefully that will warm the dining room up at least a little bit. Hermione eats more raw meat and pukes it right up. I don't even know anymore. One of the turkeys we were hunting died on its own. I'm sure it's safe to eat too. Just not raw. Come on, Hermione. As penance, I make her cook up all the meals before eating. As she starts planting rice again, Albert heads up for more mining. One of the big problems here is that Albert is spending all of his time mining when, now that the power and the freezer are up and running, it's not actually a priority anymore. He should be building larger bedrooms and helping Hermione acquire food. Speaking of acquiring food, Hermione is now at level 6 shooting. Not that it helps much, but she does bag another turkey. And there's an entire meal left, so she doesn't have to eat the bird raw. Lance? Who's Lance? Oh, wait, that tribal private eye whose lung we took? Oh no, he's still on the map. I'm going to admit I'm torn at this point. Lance is our responsibility. He was going to leave the map on his own, but we beat him up, took his lung, and tossed him aside when he couldn't even walk long enough to get off the map. Then we didn't even check on him to see that if he made it. But on the other hand, he is just a tribal guy, and they already don't like us, and he's going to eat a ton of food that we simply do not have. So, do I do the right thing and capture him, nurse him back to health, and release him again? Or do I just kind of pretend he's not down there? Ooh, an alpaca's pregnant. Nothing says springtime like baby farm animals. Remembering that cougar, I set up a grazing area to keep the alpacas closer to home. I mean, I don't want them wandering off and maybe getting caught and left for dead. Medical emergency. I wonder who that could be. As what is hopefully the very last snowstorm of the season picks up, Hermione squeaks 6 meals out of the last of our turkey meat. And about here is when I realize exactly how much time I've wasted mining all this currently useless steel. I decide to let Albert finish, seeing as he's almost done and the crops are growing now, albeit slowly in this late winter blizzard. As they finish that up, I start to finally plan their permanent bedrooms. Ignore that sound as I tell you that Albert and Hermione deserve large 5x5 rooms for all they've been through. -5 for innocent prisoner died. You know, usually I complain about that, but really I kind of feel like I got off easy this time. I move a bed into the new room, queue up a door, and finally get Albert from sleeping on the dining room floor. And as Hermione heads to bed, I set up her room to be built as well. But that can wait until morning. I queue up some torches to be built, and for the first time I realize I have development mode on. If you're curious, I use it to remove all the ground graphics for the screenshots. But for gameplay's sake, I turn it off, like a good YouTuber. Hermione's starving. We have 3 meals though, so I figure she'll eat when she gets up. Which she does. Good Hermione. Then she gets right back to work on her bedroom while Albert just sleeps the morning away. He's got a major break risk though. Ravenously hungry. Geez, you'd think we've barely been keeping food around or something. He's got a ton of other mood hits as well, and the ones we can take care of, we're going to soon. He's not getting up even though he's awake. It's his asthma keeping him in bed. I order Hermione, who still has untreated gut worms, to help him out. We obviously need some heal root. We've not planted it yet because Albert's been mining. I harvest some wild heal root nearby. And then Albert tends to Hermione. And then himself. And I queue up more foraging of wild berries. And ask Hermione to hunt some wild hares. Hermione's bed finally gets moved into its new room, and a few seconds later we get another transport pod crash. So is a 47-year-old space refugee who, in spite of only having a scratch on his torso and a stab in his right foot, is going to die in 9 hours. So I queue him up a bed in Hermione's old room and tell her to go rescue him. Then I make Albert tend to him right away. And our second female alpaca is pregnant. We get a solar flare, killing our chance to cook food, which is bad considering we don't have any meals. And I check out our new food drain to find out he's just about the single worst candidate for citizenship in the history of the game. He can't do anything useful except talk and fight. He's a wimp, so he can't really fight well anyway. And to boot, he loves himself the drugs. So we make his bed a prisoner bed and capture him. It's the only way to ensure he doesn't join us. And to make sure he doesn't feel left out of the colony entirely, I decide to take one lung for the cause. Hermione kills a hare, butchers it, and eats it raw. Then she shears the alpaca, because that's important. I start to wonder when they're going to get around to picking those berries. I stop wondering and just manually order her to do so. The power's back on, so Hermione cooks the berries while Albert tries to eat raw rabbit. I stop him by prioritizing his surgery on our guest. Success! Now we've got 2 lungs. I set our prisoner to release and hope he has less trouble walking than Lance did. As Albert goes to get our poor prisoner some food, we get attacked by a mad muffalo. And it's right on top of us. I send Hermione around the back of our storage room and Albert heads back to the kitchen to get himself a meal. So I take control and try to run Albert around the dining room. This works out terribly. He gets through the door, but the muffalo follows him. This is a new feature of 0.19, and the moment I see it, I realize that this could literally be the end of our colony. If they both go down, they could starve or bleed to death. Albert defends himself as best he can, but the muffalo wins. And now it's Hermione's turn. Instead of going for a door, she smartly gets behind 2 traps. That range skill is coming in handy now, but as the muffalo nears it... Oh, cool. Albert's down, but not in any immediate danger. I set Hermione to rescue him anyway. I allow him the good medicine, and we have her tend his wounds. She feeds him, and most of the danger from the muffalo attack is now in the past. And as is tradition, I get Hermione to strip our guest before releasing him to the wolves. The world. Albert gets up and starts hauling the muffalo corpse to the butcher's table. And we're attacked again, this time by a mad squirrel. Before it can even find it, however, it succumbs to another trap. I don't want So waking up and putting his clothes back on, so I prioritize hauling them to our stockpile. I hear Hermione dicing up the muffalo and, in panic, check on her. But instead of eating the meat raw, she's actually making meals out of it. So is no longer incapable of walking, so Hermione puts him out. As he walks right past our last prisoner's corpse, we get another transport pod crash. Forex will die in 22 hours from a cracked spine and a cut on her left leg. She's an enemy, but we don't need any more lungs. However, she's actually a really good candidate. Great construction, loves shooting, and can cook fine meals. And she doesn't even hate men. We have an open prisoner bed, so I tell Hermione to capture Forex. And this time, it's actually for recruitment. This prison is an absolute shambles, and it's cramped to boot. If we're going to win Forex over, we need better. I start with a bed for her in the other small room. Then I remove the walls and notice we've got an eclipse and a visitor while I was busy. Albert fixes up Forex as best he can. And Hermione fixes her up a more permanent bed. Quail doesn't even spend the night, so Albert misses up on our chance to trade. We probably wouldn't have bought much anyway. In the morning, Hermione more than doubles the size of Forex's room. And I realize why everything's so dirty and unrepaired. I never set up the home area. So I get to that right away. Albert strips Forex as she's wearing some very nice Devil Strand clothing and repairs all of her walls. He also very nicely puts her in the better bed. And as Hermione starts reaping out our first rice harvest, I decide it's about time Albert stopped hauling useless steel chunks and sowed our heel root plot. He, of course, would rather do anything else than this, and things are bad enough around here that I let him. For now. Hermione has tattered apparel, and we've picked up enough clothes that I think it's time to add some clothing restrictions to her. I don't want to go crazy with it and have them end up going naked or anything, so I set up their preferences to not wear awful or tattered clothes. I'll bump it up to normal and good eventually, but this is fine for now. Hermione gets up and swaps out her tattered clothes for better ones, and then has her breakfast before going out for a morning hunt. I make a proper bed for Forex so she's as comfortable as can be reasonably expected. And Hermione makes her first fine meal. And that reminds me, Albert still hasn't sown the heel root plants. I again try to force him to do it. And he again tries to get out of it. I make growing a priority. It is springtime after all. And he immediately starts reaping the rice crop. Oh well, it's better than nothing. At least he's in the right area. So I just repeatedly make him come back and do his actual job. As we now have fine meals, I knock simple meals down to 6, so we have 6 of each. That should feed 3 of us just fine. I also remove meat from the primary simple meal order and add a second simple meal order at the end that includes meat. That way, simple meals will only get made from meat if we're totally out of vegetables and have no fine meals left, and start eating the simple meals that we already have. And, finally, after his morning stroll, I order Albert to plant the final 3 heal root plants. I also queue up a second, larger field for corn this time. And they get started on it right away, just in time for a cold snap. I let them finish the field. It's a good base anyway, and maybe some of the corn will survive. They're probably going to freeze anyway, so I queue up a quick harvest on all the local berry bushes. And in a never-ending attempt to make Forex happier, I move her hospital bed and install an end table and a dresser. And then we get a late night raid. Again, it's just one guy, and now they're back to using knives. He's coming up from the south, so I don't think our panic room's going to do us much good. However, neither are any of our traps because he's attacking our buildings. I try to flank him with Hermione and attack him with Albert, but he moves on right as we get there. So we try to cut him off at the pass, but he's not headed for the pass. He's headed for one of our alpacas. Somewhat ironically, the panic room is perfect here, but we're not in it. Before we can get there, our alpaca is taking way too much damage, and it's one of the pregnant ones. Right as we get in position, he takes our alpaca out. The attacker takes an arrow and then decides to not go into our panic room. Oh no you don't, buddy. I'm not losing a second alpaca to the likes of you. Annoyingly, Hermione actually blocks Albert here and he can't get by. We're losing precious seconds, but I move Hermione out of the way. And between the 3 of us, we take him down. The second alpaca was the other pregnant one, but she's not that hurt and it looks like she'll pull through just fine. After a good night's sleep, Hermione again gets up early, has breakfast, and does some quick cooking. Albert gets up and tends to Forex, which surprises me because I didn't know she was still hurt. Then I see it. Frostbite. As a low psychic drone hits, I check Forex out. It's below freezing in a room and we left her buck naked. I make a quick 1 square stockpile in a room and set it up to allow parkas. Then, while Albert and Hermione do their late evening chores, a war merchant shows up. Forex has extreme hypothermia though, and we've still not delivered her parka. And she probably can't get up to put it on anyway. That torch just isn't doing it, so I make Albert build her an emergency campfire. And before we can trade with him, the war merchant decides it's too cold to stay. But the temperature in Forex's room rises to a toasty 80 degrees. She even gets out of bed, in time to puke all over the floor. Someday, Albert's going to finish hauling all that steel. But he won't haul a simple parka. Why? Oh, I forgot to make the stockpile critical. Hermione finally delivers Forex a parka, and Forex puts it on immediately. I change the stockpile to deliver only tribal wear. We don't have any in stock right now, but when we do, that's what I like prisoners to wear. And in a sign that we're finally catching up on all of our chores for the first time since moving in, Hermione is actually doing some cleaning. As I start preparing for Forex's eventual, if somewhat delayed citizenship by making a 3rd bedroom, we get another peace talks quest. It's for the tribe we don't like though, so I decide to ignore it. And as a new day dawns, we get a refugee being chased by a single archer. Should I take her? Well, she is Albert's ex-lover. Maybe she's why he hates women. I just have to see what she's like. Kaylee, welcome to the crew. And welcome to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I definitely enjoyed playing it. I'm HMV and I will, as always, talk at you later.